Hi everyone, Katie from Integration Learning here. And yes, you might be asking, Katie, is that Bay Area rock goddess and one-time chess records player Sugar Pie DeSanto on your shirt? Why yes, yes it is. Today we're going to be talking about critical analysis, or just analysis. Now, the origin of the word analysis comes from Greek, meaning to loosen up throughout, or a loosening up or breaking up throughout. The way that this has modified itself into current times is when a person performs analysis, they see a complex whole and they break up the component parts to understand that complex whole a little bit better. Now, my definition of analysis stays in line with that principle, but diverges in certain ways. When we're talking about analysis, particularly when we're talking about performing analysis in writing, in the body paragraphs of argumentative essays, for example, what analysis does is it identifies purpose. And this purpose can be either the writer's purpose in sharing their argument on the page, or an understanding of the purpose of the thing being studied. So in other words, if I'm writing an essay, I could be telling you my purpose for writing this essay. I want to help people in this way. I want to inform people. I want to make some sort of political change, et cetera, et cetera. Or I could also be writing an essay in which I identify another person doing that. Like if I were to write an essay, for example, on a work of art, I would say, okay, well, the artist seems to be crafting this art for this purpose because they want people to feel this certain dominant impression, or they want people to understand this way of life, whatever it may be. So the main one when we're talking about writing and we're using critical analysis is understanding purpose. Another way of saying this is analysis in an essay is the so what. Again, if it's the person writing the essay, why are they telling their audience this information? What do they hope to gain from sharing this argument, this information with other people? If that writer is analyzing someone else's work, then they have to identify the so what of the work they're analyzing, or at least extrapolate, make some sort of judgment call about what they think that purpose is. This also lends itself to the question, why is this important? Why should we care? What is at stake? And what I mean when I say what is at stake is, if you'll recall, rhetoric is about possibility. You know, we have logic, the mathematical foundation, which is about proof absolute. That's the mathematicians and the scientists and all those things trying to find the empirical evidence in the real world. Rhetoric, on the other hand, is about what could be. That's why it's largely language-based, because language is not proof absolute. Language is dynamic, it's slippery, it's changing all the time, and it deals in possibility. So when we talk about what's at stake, right, we're talking about what could be possible if either this argument is true, or people believe in this argument, or people follow this advice, or people look at this argument from the perspective of the person giving it. It can go a number of different ways, again, because we're talking about possibility, infinite. Which also leads us to the implications. If this is true, what else is true, as the improvisers say, right? If this is true, what else is true? If this is a real problem, what could be some possible consequences? If this is a solution, what could be some possible outcomes? What are the implications? Again, that can be either within the essay of the person writing it, within the argument of the person sharing it, or they could be looking at someone else's and sort of analyzing that. And then you as the reader can decide, do I agree with their perspective, their interpretation or not? And then you write your own essay or argument where you then share your own purpose and implications and what's at stake and so on and so forth. Now, a higher level of critical analysis will ask the question, who benefits from this? And this is such an important question that we can ask in our everyday lives. Who benefits from a mass audience believing this argument? Who benefits from this paradigm, from a sort of consensual agreement among many parties to believe that this is reality with a capital R? Who benefits if we all consent to do this? And that, again, is a little, right now we're just dealing with fundamentals. But if you ever want to really start to get crazy with some analysis, ask the question, who benefits from this? And you'll probably be led to surprising places. So I've talked about what the traditional definition of analysis means, what my definition as I apply it to my teaching of writing and rhetoric means. So how do we do it? How do we analyze? Now here's the fun part, and it doesn't feel fun at first. I've been teaching this method of analysis for decades now. I love it. And certain people who are able to unlock long buried parts of themselves tend to love it. But I will admit that it's difficult to, let's just say, get back on this proverbial bicycle at first. But once you do, the payoff is tremendous. Let me just say that. My method for analysis, I refer to as unlocking your inner 5-year-old. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you have children who are of that age range, anywhere from 4 to 10, or if you have siblings who are or were that age at one point, if you have nieces and nephews, if you remember what you were like at that age, think about a 5-year-old. Now, we're talking about argument. And so a lot of the arguments we present to 5-year-olds start with the word no, if we're being totally honest, right? If a 5-year-old asks you, can I go ride on your motorcycle with you, Katie? I don't have a motorcycle anymore, by the way. I used to, and I realized I was a terrible motorcycle driver. So for everyone else's sake, I quit riding, just putting it out there. But let's say a 5-year-old says, can I ride on your motorcycle, Katie? Then the adult in that situation, the arguer, the rhetor, the person using critical analysis, is going to argue the following. No, you cannot ride on the motorcycle. Now that would be a certain type of argument. No, right? It implies an opinion. It doesn't express it outright, but there are other options. So that's, the person could say yes. Well, we won't go down that route, but that's why it implies an argument. It's not proof absolute. It's not a non-changeable fact. It's something that can vary from person to person, place to place, situation to situation. So the person says no. What is the first thing the 5-year-old says in response? That's right. They say, why? Or why not? Why can't I ride on the motorcycle? And again, you as the person who has the critical analysis, who has the world experience, who has the knowledge, because that's what we're talking about when we're talking about sharing arguments. I feel this way because I am educated enough to feel this way about this topic. That is always baseline for arguments. If you're not educated on a topic, it is a massive folly to present an argument on something you know nothing about or very little about. So you're educated on the subject and you say to the kid, no, and they say, why not? Now, Why are they saying why or why not? Because they're 5 years old. Because their conception of the world is that big. Your conception of the world is infinite, right? It's huge. You've been on this planet however many years or decades, and you understand the world in a way that the 5-year-old doesn't. And so it's your job as the person arguing to explain why. Because a 5-year-old doesn't get it. They're 5. And so you say something like, well, it's dangerous, or I don't want to get arrested, or you could get hurt, or I don't have a helmet for a 5-year-old. Whatever your response is what's known as a claim to justify your argument, a claim to justify your thesis if we're talking in writing terms. And you present that claim. Let's go with one of them. Let's go with, I don't want to get arrested. What's the 5-year-old going to say? Some variation of, why? Why would you get arrested? But what if you don't? It's okay. I think we could be totally fine, right? All of those are variations on a why, because they're not just taking the person at their word, right? It continues. We're unpacking. We're talking about purpose. We're talking about implication. We're talking about so what? And then you explain, well, if somebody saw me riding around with a 5-year-old on a motorcycle, they would arrest me because that is against the law in the state of California, and hopefully the rest of the country, but with everything going on, who knows, right? And then the 5-year-old keeps asking why. And what do you do as the adult, because you've been trained from your own age of 5? You eventually say, because I said so, conversation over. Because the 5-year-old's driving you nuts, for lack of a better term, and that's okay. But what we have to do, what we have to learn from that situation, is that when we share arguments to people who are not educated on our topic, who may not have a vested interest in our topic, who may have never thought about our topic before, or at least very little, or maybe they only have like a TikTokified understanding of that argument. What we then have to do is we have to anticipate their whys. We have to anticipate what they're going to ask about purpose. We have to anticipate implications, what's at stake, who benefits from this. We have to do that work in our writing for our audience. And so we have to unlock our inner 5-year-old. We have to go back to that space of looking at the world with these gigantic fresh eyes. And we have to say, okay, what could happen? Why is this important? Or again, if we want to get a little bit deeper, why do I feel this way? Why do I behave this way? Where am I coming from that this is my argument? And where might other people be coming from that their argument is totally different? And if you think about what it's like talking to a kid, talking to a 5-year-old, doesn't that kind of feel like the original definition of analysis I shared? That you are picking apart and dismantling this very complicated thing that we take for granted as a singular entity, and really looking at all of the tiny pieces that make up that thing. That's what we're doing. That's what we do when we ask about purpose. And so when you are analyzing, again, the first few times you do this, it definitely feels a little clunky because, again, we've had years of silencing our inner 5-year-old. We've had years of saying, well, that's just the way it is. We've had years of what's called inference, where we understand, right? Enthymeme, things like that, where we don't have to say every single piece out loud. But this is where in analysis you have to, because you have to do that work for your audience if you want them to agree with you. You need to lead them gently by the hand to the point you're getting at. Because if you just say, well, you know what I mean, that is the kiss of death in argument, because they're not you. They don't know exactly what you mean. Things that could be clear as day to you, think about how they are to a 5-year-old. So I hope this discussion, this definition of analysis helps. Try it out. Again, if it feels clunky at first, just keep answering those whys. And don't stop after 3 or 4 whys. Exhaust the whys. Again, be the 5-year-old. Imagine there's no adult to tell you because I said so. Get all the way to the logical endpoint of the argument that you're making. Explore all the origins and possibilities you can. And I promise you, once you get the hang of it, your argument will soar. It'll be so much better for you. And let's be honest, you'll have a lot more writing on the page, which is what we all want when we're talking about college essay writing. All right, well, I hope this helped. Like I said, I hope you all have a wonderful day. I hope you start looking at the world through the eyes of a 5-year-old and just start analyzing everything and asking purpose. So what implication, what's at stake, who benefits with everything around you, and see what comes up. All right. Last thing I want to say, as I say in all my videos, please be kind to yourselves.